I was thinking how upsetting it would be to a lot of people to hear that, but at the same time, like also here, it's the more real you make it and the more you let the child own it, the more real it is.
I haven't seen a kid in a week, 2 weeks. I'm at a kiddush on Shabbos. And a kid is trying to catch my eye, my Talmud. And I know that I will not be able to give him the Shalom Aleichem. I will not make eye contact with him.
I can tell you that as a therapist and as a mother, I have seen this work. And it's something, sometimes it's the most simple things that actually can really help a child.
Welcome to the Learning Curve podcast, brought to you by Mishpacha magazine.
We're raising children in a changing and challenging world.
So let's tackle the important issues facing families today.
I'm Rabbi Garfield, Manal of Yeshiva Torah Emes in Houston, and I love talking about chinuch.
I'm Rabbi Ari Schonfeld, Manal of Yeshiva Katana of Manhattan, Rosh Meister of Beis Sipra Manhattan, Director of Camp Aish. I also love talking chinuch, and of course, a little bit of fishing.
Join us as we answer your questions and discuss the topics that matter to parents the most.
Welcome back to another edition of the Learning Curve, Season 3. We've had some quite spirited conversations in our first 3 episodes. Rabbi Garfield, how are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. Yes, it's been a lot of fun. I really feel like we've touched on really important issues, and that's the point, right? To discuss important issues.
Yes, it is. Our last episode, we had a wonderful conversation with Rabbi Spira, who mashpia, not mashkiach, for those keeping score at home. And we delved into the topic of chutzpah and how to properly identify, deal with, uncover. I don't know. You're the social worker, right? You're the counselor.
You're doing great. You're doing a great job. Rabbi, you have a lot of kaifis. You're wonderful. Keep up the great work.
There you go. So obviously, chutzpah is, as we discussed last time, really a hot topic because it seems that the previous generation of chutzpah wasn't tolerated. In our generation, maybe it is tolerated. We've said over many times the story with Rabbi Leib Steinman at the Term Soar Convention. I wasn't there. You were there, correct? Yes. I definitely was not there. Can you repeat the story?
Yeah, we must have mentioned it on the last episode.
I don't think we did. I don't think we fleshed it out.
So first you have to set the scene because it was quite a remarkable scene. This is at the Friar Tuck Inn, which is an old dump that they used to have the Term Soar Convention at. And they had downstairs this huge room. One of the nice things about it, and one of the challenges of all the Term Soar Conventions, is finding a place big enough. So the Friar Tuck, have you been there, Rabbi? Do you know the Friar Tuck?
I was there, not for the Term Soar Convention. I was there.
Okay, so
I was there for Pesach once.
So downstairs they had this like theater room. I don't know, it was like huge room, and it went all the way back. So during your average convention, which probably had 1,500 people, maybe half the room was full, not even, maybe a third. It was a huge room, crazy size. So Ryan Leib was coming, but there was a lot of political excitement because he had just come out that he would support Nachal Haredi. I don't know all the details. I wasn't like.
What year is this?
It's a great question. I would think 2005. I don't know. You could probably check. But something like that. Maybe, something around 2005. So he had just endorsed Nachal Haredi, and some groups of Hasidim found that very offensive. And he was coming to America for, I guess, to raise money or to give chizuk or whatever. And they were protesting. So we had all sorts of police presence, and it was Thursday night. So yeah, they opened it up to anyone who wanted to come. So it wasn't just regular Term Soar people. It was like loads and loads of people. And then outside, there were the people protesting. And then there was like state police all over the place because I guess they were worried about some kind of...
It's amazing how few things change over time. But continue.
It was really like it was a maimed. So they brought him, and all the questions were prepared. I got a good seat. I remember I got there early so I could really see what was going on. And one of the questions was, they asked him about a boy who has chutzpah and how do you handle it and what's with chutzpah. And he said, Ein davar kazeh chutzpah. There's no such thing as chutzpah. And the place was just, shocked by what he said. And he then explained that, it's just, I forgot the exact words, but it's a child in pain or it's a child who's having trouble. But that chutzpah itself is not, the right uptight. And that was one of the most powerful things that he said. And people still talk about that all the way till today, because it was one of those jaw drop moments. Like, you have to come it's funny, but you'd think does the Gadol B'Yisrael have to come, a 90 whatever 5-year-old man have to travel across the country, across the world rather, to say that to America? And the answer is yeah. He does.
Yes. So on that note, and continuing that topic, our first question is a continuation of the topic of chutzpah. And I'm feeling, by the way, nostalgic.
Why?
Because actually the first time we met was in this type of environment, because I'm sitting in my Night Seder America office. Usually I record from Yeshiva, but I'm sitting in my Night Seder America office. Maybe that's, I don't know. So if I start doing one hen, two ducks, I guess someone will finish it, even though you don't know what that means. So here we go. Here's the question. I'll ask it to you, Rabbi. Dear TLC, I love the discussion on chutzpah from the last episode with Rabbi Spira, and was wondering if TLC had an eitzah for me. Eitzah could be man or woman. We've established this already. Lamaisa could be man or woman. We've already established.
Let's see. Keep going.
Yeah. My 7-year-old son's teacher keeps calling me to complain that he's being a mechutzef, but otherwise well-behaved, she admits. But her examples do not seem like chutzpah to me. Once he was spacing out, so she said to him, if you don't want to be here, you can leave the class. And he said, okay, probably with a big smile on his face, and walked out of class to roam the hallway. She also once asked the class as a whole why they aren't behaving as well as they do. By Rebbe, it's an English teacher. And boys raised their hands to give her ideas. My son replied, well, Torah is Halig and math isn't. Okay. Maybe that's a little tactless. The kids are 7 after all. But chutzpah? My issue is she keeps calling me, asking me to discipline my son for this. Well, this is a real specific case. And she's definitely reprimanding him in school. When I speak to my son, he's bewildered at what he could have possibly done wrong. What am I supposed to do? So this is a mother asking that she believes that the teacher is mistranslating her son's actions as chutzpah, and therefore is treating him very sternly and, severely.
Right.
Much of them.
So my first reaction is I have a hard time believing this is a 7-year-old son who's coming up with these pithy responses. It's not exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not a 7-year-old. I mean, that takes a certain amount of strength. Maybe a 10-year-old.
Okay.
So I don't get caught up in the age, but it's almost like a kid who's old enough to come up with these reactions and is sophisticated enough understands that there's a certain cuteness to it.
Level of
but he doesn't understand that. So it's Pagin on Dibor. I thought that I'm stalking the guy, but I don't thought that's a stalk. Come on. That's why.
Okay.
Now, we don't check the yichus of these questions, and whoever wrote it could have changed it or hid themselves or whatever. Right. So, but just that's my reaction I'm going to say, if we're talking about a 10-year-old, just say, then I think you could talk to the child about it, and say, well, let's talk it through and give some examples from if something that's important to him and try to teach him. I don't think I would necessarily come down so hard. I wouldn't tell the kid he's a Russia or something, but there is something to be learned about being appropriate and telling a teacher that her subject isn't important, right? Torah is Halig and math is not appropriate. Right. It's not appropriate in 1st grade, 3rd grade, 8th grade, high school. And, this type of stuff happens all around. So I really am not going to give the mother a pass or the teacher, frankly. I don't know why the teacher can't be involved in this, but everyone should be explaining to this child what's appropriate and what's not and help him understand. Obviously, we're not talking where he's on the spectrum and he doesn't know. I mean, that's a whole nother, we're not even going there. But I mean, it's possible he doesn't know, but that's a disability. That's not something to machavek so quickly. But leaving that aside, so I'm not going to let this questioner get out of it by saying he could zing it, but he can't take it. I don't buy that. That's my answer. Is that allowed? I'm breaking the rule because I'm not validating the question.
Changing the question. You're not validating it. You're definitely breaking the Rabbi Garfield rule, but validating.
No validation to that writer. I apologize.
To me, and we spoke about this in the last episode, I think one of the hardest disciplinary sugyas to navigate is chutzpah because of the ego that's involved. As a Rebbe, as a menahel, parent, when a kid tests your authority, there is the response that we have, that we get upset. If we're being honest with ourselves, it'd be nice if we had a little truth serum and measure how much are we upset because my son really did something wrong and he's going to learn not to have a karsatoiv and hachno and derech eretz and he's going to ruin his midas, and how much am I upset because how dare you treat me that way? And I think that the biggest challenge that we have as rebbeim, as teachers, and as mechanchim is that is responding to the child, is trying to take the self out of the equation. It is maybe the hardest thing to do, because Mirzen and Fart mentioned, and we all have that challenge. So, here you have a teacher that Lemaisa, the kid is stalking, and he's zinging, and he's being a smart aleck, whatever age he is. And it's embarrassing for a teacher. When a teacher says, if you don't want to be here, you can leave the class. The teacher's expectation is that's a strong reprimand to the child, who's going to sit back and say, oh, Miss Smith, I'm sorry, and sit down. And when he says, okay, and walks out of the class, part of what bothers this teacher is he's not in a spell from her. He's just not impressed by her threat. It doesn't work.
And the other kids, it doesn't work for the other kids also, right?
It doesn't work for the other kids. So that is always something that you try to see him in Rebbeim. I had a Rebbe in the last few years. I was so impressed by the self-awareness. He was battling a kid who was with chutzpah. A kid had a chutzpah for a while. And he comes into the office one day and he says, you know what, I've been doing it all wrong. There's a Rebbe on his own, or a seasoned Rebbe, an amazing Rebbe. He says, it's not about me. It was amazing. And I didn't want, as a manal, if you're going to criticize a Rebbe in a certain way, you have to be very careful, right? So he said to me, it's not about me. I'm letting him get to me. I'm going home with it. I'm letting his zings and his chutzpah, blatant chutzpah, get to me. It's not about me. It's about him. I'm changing my approach. I'm going to kill him with love, right? And just love them, as your uncle, Rabbi Trank, what his whole life was about. And to me, that nakuda, to change your approach. I'll share a story that happened recently in our yeshiva. The only boy that knows what happened to is the boy that did it. So, no, he called one of our rebbeim, not his rebbe, Mr. Real chutzpah, right?
to stuck him.
Yeah, he was upset at the rebbe for, I don't know what, in the lunchroom asking for quiet. And let's say the rebbe's name is Mr. Goldstein, Rabbi Goldstein. He said, yes, Mr. Goldstein. Real chutzpah, right? Right. I don't know what age, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, chutzpah. Right? So the rebbe sent it to my office. And the Rebbe came into my office. And this Rebbe, by the way, was incredibly appropriate in the way that it wasn't personal, just chutzpah. Right. And the first kid tried to play the game with me. I didn't know I can't. He's not my Rebbe. Why? I didn't know you can't call him Mr. Right? The game. Right? The game that they all play when the hand's in the cookie jar. And then the kid, now I don't know, I laughed at him, but I said, come on, you know that you can't call a Rebbe Mr. Right? You did it. And I said to him, I know why you did it. You did it because you thought it would your class is upset that the Rebbe was dismissing late from the lunchroom. And you figured, I'm going to stuff the Rebbe, and my class is going to react behind me, and I'm going to be the leader. And the kid pauses, and he says, you're right.
Wow.
That's why I did it. And he says, the self-awareness was incredible. This kid says to me, and in the moment, it felt very good. It's a kid. He said, because it was cool, because I stuck the Rebbe. So, and then he apologized to the Rebbe. We dealt with it, now, did I have the right to maybe punish this kid severely? I don't know. The kid's a real chutzpah, right? But the chutzpah was an attempt of this kid to stuck the Rebbe in a way to help his classmates. And the Rebbe who pulled the kid out of I think appropriately, you can't be in a lunchroom if you're going to call a Rebbe Mr. And didn't get angry. Just said, that's just not a way to speak to
what happened next? I mean, what'd you do next? After the kid admitted this? Like, how do you...
I called his mother. So this is the new age Rebbe and me, the new age Manal, ready? The kid apologized to the Rebbe. Okay. And I called his mother to give her a nachas report. Isn't that crazy? I know. And I said, Mrs. Smith, I have a very odd nachas report. Your son got in trouble in yeshiva today. And it was trouble. No, I was it wasn't fun. The kid in my office was not fun. I spoke to him pretty seriously. Maybe I even took away his recess. I don't remember. Right? It could be that he had, some sort of consequence. But I said I was so impressed with his awareness of being able to self-reflect and say, yes, it was wrong. And I said, that's growth. So I think if I or the Rebbe would have reacted with kas, with anger, with, hey, call me, right, and send him home, I think we would have lost an opportunity.
Yeah, I wonder, we had a similar Misa here in that a kid who was chutzpah that called up and admitted and apologized. And it was really amazing that he did that. And I wonder how many, if you're too aggressive, that would never happen, right? If we're too like suspend the kid on the spot every time they're chutzpah day and be extremely, we wouldn't give them a chance to even own it because they'd be so quick to go into defensive fight or flight and lying and all this stuff. It's only because you created an environment where the kid felt he could be honest with you and not suffer horribly that he doesn't.
Right.
But by creating that environment, the kid doesn't always admit like that. It's not always end that way.
No, you don't know. No.
So it's just an interesting balance, right? You could argue that it's great to create that environment because you're right. Not always does it result in a kid finding his way, but when it does, it's a real chinuch moment.
Right. And then always, I guess the other side of the coin would be, is there a concern that if you're creating this environment, you're loosening, the answer is you are.
Right.
The answer is you are. You are.
You are. But that's the new,
you're loosening.
That's the new way. I don't know what to say about it. The new way is.
I like to tell people, so my excuse why I can loosen is that I have a small yeshiva. That's always my excuse. Don't learn from me, because my yeshiva, when I have only 12 to 15 kids in the classroom, I can be loose and hold them all at the same time. I don't know if I had 5 parallel classes. I don't know how you have that. Now, that's the mile of a small yeshiva. Right?
Exactly. It's sad if you can't, to the extent that one can't do that, because, well, at least what we're saying, and I don't know if everyone would agree to us, and probably not, but at least we seem to be agreeing is this is the ideal model of chinuch, is like bringing children to come to the recognition on their own. I was actually just watching a Yom Ian on technology, okay? And this person was talking about this and saying, especially depending on the community, but we're communities where some kids have phones, some kids don't have phones, let's say. So you could take a hard line with your kids and say, anyone who has a phone but then it's just a matter of time till they'll either break or lie to you. I mean, there's a chance they won't, but there's also a chance that they will.
Right.
The alternative is to be more open about it and say, listen, it is a struggle. We all struggle. Let's do it together. Let's have that conversation. It's a much less top-down approach. And I was thinking as I was listening to it, wow, this would really upset a lot of people if they heard this Yom Ian. It was a psychologist speaking, a very frum psychologist, but a psychologist nonetheless.
Right.
And I was thinking how upsetting it would be to a lot of people to hear that. But at the same time, like also here, it's the more real you make it and the more you let the child own it, the more real it is, the more.
Right. A dimion, or just a small comparison, is that in my yeshiva, we have 35 boys that eat lunch together in the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So we let them get out of their seat by lunch. And we were discussing amongst the Rebbe meeting that, if you have 500 kids in the dining room, you can't let them get out of the seat. It'll be a food fight every day. The ideal is that if a kid needs to get a drink, he shouldn't have to raise his hand by lunch. He should be able to get his, He should be able to move. So these are built-in advantages. I don't want everyone to apply to my yeshiva because then I'll lose this advantage. But
we have to find that balance. I would hope that people with bigger yeshivas still make an effort to find ways to make sure children experience ownership of their decisions and of their life and of their identity. They don't just follow along like sheep. Okay.
All right. Question two.
I
think this is from you to me. As we're in Hanukkah season.
It says the word Hanukkah in it. Okay, here we go. I have not seen this yet, so here we go. How are we supposed to teach our kids moderation and restraint in today's world? I noticed Hanukkah lately has become totally about the stuff for my kids, and it really bothers me. But they're getting gifts from grandparents at Hanukkah parties, etc. It feels normal and even expected for them, no matter how much I emphasize being grateful and encourage them to focus on what matters. When we were growing up, the Hess truck and the Cabbage Patch dolls used to be the dream of every child for Hanukkah. Now it is good for one night. But what am I getting tomorrow? Are my expectations for my children to be Sameach B'Chelko unfair? Okay, first of all, did you have a Cabbage Patch?
I definitely did not. Did my sisters? They definitely wanted them. I don't know.
American dream.
We did get Hess trucks from my grandmother. I don't know what I wanted. I know when I was in 4th grade, I got a Little Tykes basketball hoop, and that was one of the most greatest days of my life growing up. I want to share something that we heard on season 1 of The Learning Curve. And I remember it resonated with me so strongly then that it's one of those I filed away. In the conversation about camp, we were talking to Mrs. Debbie Selengut from Benos Marava, from Benos Bracha and Pesach. And the conversation came up about a similar conversation, but the girls need all these fancy skirts and all the different things that I probably pronounced wrong then, so I'm not going to repeat. How do we deal with my daughter wants this and this? And her response was, really? It's so horrible. When you go to a wedding, Mrs. So-and-so, you don't want to look the best? You don't have 5 skirts in your closet? You don't go to, I don't know, whatever website it is to get the, designer shoes cheaper, and you don't want to look perfect whenever you go out with your friends. So I think that we have to be very careful in being consistent with our kids. And, when we don't want our children, when we want to not be misameach l'chelkai and to show gratitude and not to want the next gadget, what happens when the new iPhone comes out? Are you getting it right away? Right? Are you getting this and this in your world? And then whether an adult or children are different, of course, it's my money. I work for it, blah, blah, blah. The messaging that our kids get from our modeling is much more important than what we can say here on the learning curve. Always, but specifically, in this area. You just made a wedding last week for your child and you had a 14-piece band. And now your second child comes and is complaining on Hanukkah that he wants the new, some device. And you're like, when I was a kid, you were a kid. What happened to last Thursday and at the wedding that we made and the Shabbat brachas that, I think, first of all, we so often unfairly blame our kids for the way they quote unquote turn out. And we look outward as opposed to inward. So that's my response, by the way, to this question.
You assume the questioner is being inconsistent by the fact that the kids are pushing the limit? Like you're saying the kids always mimic the parent? And if they're not?
No, I don't know the questioner. I'm saying that we're not speaking to individuals, right? Okay. At least I don't know who the person is. I think that generally speaking, the families that live misameach bechelkai as families, their children are misameach. I think that's generally speaking. Now, you're in a school environment, and of course, and girls are affected more than boys. But when you're in a yeshiva environment, and Hanukkah comes, and everyone's getting, a lot of gifts and presents, and one night, when I was growing up, we got one Hanukkah present, Hanukkah, and then maybe whatever the family Hanukkah party was. My kids expect something every night. It could be, I don't know, a fidget spinner, but at least, we still have fidget spinners. At least, and so Baruch Hashem, we have enough Hanukkah Mesivas and family parties that it usually works out. But I think Hanukkah is a time that we give gifts. I think it's a big challenge. I think it's a stress. I think most often Hanukkah is a time where wherever you give your kids are not going to be happy. I don't know if that's the moment where you like, when I was a kid, it's a time that kids are very excited for gifts. You get them something as geschmack, and every family has their own different minhag. I think it's a much larger conversation than just Hanukkah. Of misameach lechelka, my kid should be happy with a Cabbage Patch doll on Hanukkah. I know I didn't really answer the question, but that's my answer.
No, I think it's a good point. I don't have a whole lot to add. Well said.
And now we'll move on after your silence, Rabbi Garfield, which is rare for you, but welcomed. Now we move on to the spotlight question of the week. And before asking the question, we'll bring on our guest. So really, it is our pleasure to introduce and to welcome Mrs. Shaindy Muller to the Learning Curve podcast. Welcome, Mrs. Muller. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Happy to have you join us. And I'll just tell the audience a little bit about Mrs. Muller. Shaindy Muller is trained as a licensed mental health counselor and school psychologist with a private practice in Muncie, New York. She works primarily with children, teens, and their parents, addressing a wide range of challenges that arise in the course of child and adolescent development. Her areas of specialization include everything that happens in school: ADHD, anxiety, emotional dysregulation, social issues, and in recent years, an increasing focus on trauma-related concerns. Shaindy uses a collaborative approach to her work, helping families navigate emotional and behavioral difficulties with compassion and clarity. And it is a pleasure to have you on the Learning Curve. Welcome. And Rabbi Garfield is going to ask you the question that we received that we thought we couldn't get an appointment with you because that's impossible. So we'll have you on the podcast to talk about it. So Rabbi Garfield, take it away.
Thank you very much for having me on, having the opportunity to do this.
Welcome. Okay, here we go. Dear TLC, how do we encourage a healthy sense of self-esteem in our kids? My daughter is 8, and as soon as she thinks she's going to fail at something, she immediately gives up. That could be anything from homework, trying a new hobby, or even playing a game. Another thing is that her classmates or her neighborhood friends have a comment or an opinion about her that's not positive. She is totally devastated, and she doesn't let things roll off her back. How can we help her? Simple enough.
Okay. Good question. Got all the different points there.
Right.
I think to get started, the first step would be to really first define what self-esteem is, because it can seem like a very broad term, what self-esteem. But so I think it's just important to just take a moment and just define it. So in terms of self-esteem, it's really like our opinion of ourselves, what we value about ourselves and how we see our worth, It's our confidence in our ability to do something. So just that I think that's a good place to just start. in terms of what self-esteem actually is. So I think just thinking it through why, like how to help someone with their self-esteem, first we would try to figure out why someone is having low self-esteem, because there can be so many different reasons why someone's having low self-esteem in the first place. And I think as parents, it's good for us to take a step back and why is this child in particular having a hard time with their self-esteem? Because there are some recurring issues that kind of fit a profile that could then make more sense in terms of how can I help this child build their self-esteem.
Do all children start with low self-esteem and then you have to build them up? Or do some kids start with decent self-esteem and you have to ruin it? What's the self-esteem, the preset self-esteem standard?
It's a great question. I think it's it's that typical nature versus nurture thing, which has a greater impact. I think most of the research shows it's 50-50.
Great.
Right? Meaning it is how our child is wired and it's their environment. It's the combination of both. So it's not for parents to be like, oh, shoot, my kid has poor self-esteem. That means that I am, it's all my fault. I say this to parents all the time. You are almost always not the reason your child is having a hard time, but you're going to be an integral part of the solution in helping
And
out.
what age does it start to express itself? Like a baby, would you say, oh, that baby has low self-esteem? Is that a thing?
So it's great. So
I've heard of a baby
I'm
with
not
low
going to sound so
self-esteem.
sophisticated right now,
Okay.
but if we talk about like the different stages of child development, the second stage is autonomy versus doubt. And that's somewhere around like age 2-3. That's where it really starts happening in terms of that. But it really can start earlier too, in that whether someone trusts the world or not. And that has a lot to do with their primary caregiver being there. But I don't want to dwell on that because myself included have definitely done things differently than would have been ideal at the time for my children. And it's not any one thing that's going to make it or break it. It's over time. I think parenting, unlike other relationships, and I think it's very reassuring. As a mother, it's very reassuring to know that unlike other relationships, it's the sum of it. It's not this one specific incident. Because we're the primary caregiver, because we have that special relationship, I think it makes it easier for us as parents to know it's okay. So I didn't respond the right way this time. I can do it next time. Yes.
One of the things that his mother describes is something that I find to be the most reoccurring, what's it called? Combination. And that is kids that have, on the one hand, the need to be perfect. And on the other hand, the anxiety or the fear of I can't get a perfect score and therefore I don't try. They have this. So what is that? Is that all a fake bloated self-esteem? It's so often where the mother, it's probably my most consistent challenge with a struggling kid is a kid that I know this. I have to get 100, have to get 100, have to get 100. And then he won't even try. So it's the perfecting.
Right. If he's really protecting himself, he's trying. I mean, if I don't try, then I can't fail.
Correct.
Then I didn't even do it. But that's why I wanted to just touch a little bit on what are some of the reasons why someone might have low self-esteem to begin with.
Okay.
And there's some things I think you'll very likely nod your head and be like, yep, that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it could be more than one of these situations that kind of together add up to a child being like this. So the first one I would say, and I think you've already touched on it, is anxiety. And anxiety, that fear of the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen next, picturing that worst case scenario. It can be the more general anxiety or the social anxiety. What are people thinking of me? And all of that. This girl was devastated that something happened with the neighbors, right? So does not mean that every child with low self-esteem has anxiety, but it's definitely an enormous piece of the puzzle often. Not always, but often could be a part of it. And that's why it's good for parents to take a step back to try to figure out, well, where are they? Every person has anxiety. We're supposed to have anxiety. Hashem made us that it serves a purpose. We are supposed to have anxiety. It elicits that fight or flight response, which allows us to go into survival mode. The problem is that in today's day and age, we tend to go into this survival mode a lot quicker than necessary because, Baruch Hashem, most things are not life-threatening. So I think that's one piece. So if, that's one piece for parents to keep in mind. Children with ADHD. I'm sure this is something that you see a lot in school, and probably in school, the piece that gets them the most in trouble is the impulsivity piece. And since they're constantly doing things that they didn't realize, they didn't take in the whole situation, they were in the moment, they didn't predict the future from the past, they keep doing these things that then they keep getting criticized or redirected in a way that can lower their sense of value of themselves or their worth, whether they said something that was inappropriate. So now kids or the teacher are looking at them strangely or like calling them out on it, or they do something that's breaking a rule. It really ends up, or they can't concentrate. And so therefore they're feeling dumb and then they don't know the work, right? So they have that situation going on. Someone with a learning issue, someone has a learning disability, which often can go hand in hand with the ADHD, but sometimes it can be exclusive. A kid with dyslexia, a kid with, some other learning issue, though that will, can lead into it also. Another thing is children that are emotionally intense that don't necessarily have ADHD or anxiety, but they're just very intense children. They feel their emotions very intensely. So for someone else, someone made a comment, it might make them feel like this strongly, but for them, they're feeling it this strongly, and then it just chips away at their sense of self. And then the last thing, which we really can't control at all, is if a child's had a bad experience. And that can happen, and that's like the nature versus nurture. The nurturing thing, the experiences that they've experienced, whether they were bullied by someone or they've had a repeated bad experience with a certain teacher, chas v'shalom, which we hope is not the case. But these things can happen, and that would be the why. Like, why might
Is
they
it
be
important to
feeling that?
diagnose the why in order to address it, or does it not matter either way? You got to build the kid first.
You can disagree, but I would argue yes, because when we know the why, what to do becomes more clear for the parent, meaning, and that it just gives it more direction, right? When we're talking to someone and we know the context behind it, what I would say to parents is go with your gut. Your gut feeling is usually right. I can't tell you how many times in my office or speaking to principals, they'll say, yes, I turn to the parent and I ask them, what's your gut feeling? Hashem gives parents that extra seichel to know their child best. Hashem gifted this child to this parent for a reason. So I tell parents, go with your gut and think for it doesn't have to be running to the therapist right away, but to take a step back. What is likely at the core of my child's struggle with their self-esteem?
We try to tell parents, that's what, Garfield, close your ears. That's what camp is for, that it builds, a self-esteem outside the classroom, and take your kid for piano lessons and for ice cream, all those wonderful things. Is it too much of an uphill battle if the bottom line is the child is in yeshiva most of their waking hours? A super majority of their year and days is spent in the classroom. So yes, when you have the child that struggles in the classroom and is getting in trouble and has anxiety and has a fear of tests and yada, yada, yada. So when that child comes home, you celebrate them and, you tell them they're the most amazing thing and they become a ballet. And is that more than just a Band-Aid, or can that really supersede and fill in a gap, a gaping hole that comes as a result of a struggle?
That's really a good thing to ponder on. I would argue it could be part of the puzzle, but it's not going to be the solution in and of itself. Going back to what I said before, parents have a far greater impact on their children for the positive than they realize. So yes, if you know that this child, playing up to a child's strengths definitely can be good. If we know that there's an area that they do shine in, it's great to give them that opportunity. And that is one of the things that I would suggest, to build up their strengths and to work on accepting their weaknesses. That's totally a good idea, but that alone is probably not gonna cut it. What I would say is, and these are some of the ideas that just come to mind, there's someone, Dr. Eli Leibowitz, who is, he is actually the director of the program for anxiety at the Yale Child Study Center. And he's well known also for creating the SPACE program. It's a great program for treating anxiety.
NASA? He created a
No, I forgot what the acronym is. It's a program for training parents how to work with their children with severe anxiety, like school refusal, some of the real big things,
right.
like crippling OCD, though, and he's fantastic. And he talks about this idea that it's great to tell your kids, you can do it, you don't need to be afraid. But he says something that's so simple and so profound. And I find myself using this a lot. Instead of just saying, you can do it, it's, I believe you have what it takes to do it. When we just that simple switch, it's uncomfortable to go out with the neighbors. I have this feeling in me that you have what it takes to do it, to get through that uncomfortable, that small switch. And we can think it's so
You're putting them in control a little bit. Is that what you're empowering?
And
you're empowering.
you lend your ego also. You're lending your belief since you already have a relationship with them. So you could do it. If I'm not mistaken, on a previous podcast of yours, said something about love, that a child, just knows that they're loved. We can't take it for granted that if the parent is saying, you have it in you to do it, that they then believe they have it in them to do it. Us saying, I believe, I know it's hard. I believe you have what it takes. I can tell you that as a therapist and as a mother, I have seen this work. And it's sometimes it's the most simple things that actually can really help a child. So that's one thing that I would say. Another thing is modeling. And I know it's also may sound cliche, but if we really had to put all of parenting into one word, modeling would probably be the biggest one there. And a parent can get creative with the modeling. If we know that our child is having an issue in that specific area, let's say with self-esteem, then if let's say we know they're uncomfortable, they're, because they made a mistake. So me making a mistake, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and they're in the room, the camera's rolling. How I react to it is huge. And then what I say to them afterwards is another opportunity. So first I'm saying to them, I'm showing them, yeah, I made a mistake. Kind of uncomfortable when that happens. But then it's also, but that's okay. Because, and we literally model to them what we would love for them to be saying themselves.
You're helping me think of a child on the spectrum. There are certain social behaviors that we take for granted, that people know, but the child on the spectrum, you have to say it out explicitly because they won't pick it up. So I feel like you really have the same sort of reference with a child with anxiety. As an adult, we self-talk and we address our anxiety to ourselves, but we need to say it out loud to the child so they could hear us, since they seem to have this deficiency. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we're really, and I think when we're parenting from that mindset, I know that this is why it's so important, that first step of where's my child's self-esteem issues coming from, because then I could be more focused on, so where does this child need it? And they could see us be okay with making a mistake. I made a mistake. I did. It happened. I think I'm going to be able to handle it, or work through it. Or if they're going to sound more therapist, I guess, my heart's really beating from that mistake, or, oh my gosh, I was so, and they can go through all of that's fine. But it's whatever their gut feeling is, that kid needs to see modeled to them.
Just to share just how this works and almost like in real life, I disciplined a kid in my yeshiva. See, we're not just loose. I disciplined a kid in my yeshiva recently, and the father called me and thought I did it totally the wrong thing. And he called me up respectfully, but really upset at me that I mishandled the situation. And I said to him, you might be right. And he was like, what? I said, I don't have all the answers. Your son did this and this. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt it needed this certain consequence. I was hoping he would respond positively. You're telling me that when he came home, he responded negatively. You might be right. And I'm open to suggestions. You tell me what I could do. And he was probably so disappointed. No, but it was such a different conversation in that, I didn't have that I was trying, not model, but trying to show him that I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers, right? You're struggling with your son. I'm struggling with son, the back and forth. I guess what I want to just pivot towards is, you're talking to two Manalim who we don't have the ability to take the kid to ballet lessons. We don't have the ability to do all those things with a kid. We're the principal, right? And the manal in the yeshiva, we have Rebbeim, we have teachers who are struggling with kids with ADHD. And let's leave the medication piece. We know that's a real piece. Try if the kids need medication, that's not for now. But there are kids, whether they're medicated or not, they struggle with anxiety and with ADHD. And it's very frustrating and challenging and difficult for a Rebbe and a teacher not to put down and to demean, but it's how can we create a positive environment for the kid who's struggling with self-esteem when he's doing things that causes him to struggle with self-esteem? So what can we do in yeshiva?
The last point that I really wanted to make was this idea also, and this goes into this idea, we talk about like the 80-20 rule, right? That we're aiming for 80% of the time positive, 20% of the time negative.
Right.
So the thought process behind it is that they have the bank of self-worth, right? And we will hope that we're making enough deposits that when we need to withdraw, we have what to withdraw on. And that goes to the relationship piece of it, meaning when that child has a relationship with us, then we're able to because we've put enough deposits in it and they feel safe and comfortable with us, if we have to withdraw on it, then we will be able to. And that speaks to the self-esteem piece too. If we're making a lot of deposits, and if they have situations where it makes them doubt their self-worth and their self-value, they have what to rely on because there've been enough deposits. From the parenting end, parents, there's two ways to go. There's the ones that it's specifically related to what they actually did. So we caught them doing something right? And so we praise them for it, and it's specific, and it's not just, oh wow, great job. Because children are great at being able to see when we're being truthful about it and when we're just trying to make them feel good. And so that's number one, meaning actually giving them specific praise. And then the other part, and this I really could apply to teachers and mechafim as well, meaning, right, that we're doing those those things that are based on what they're actually doing. And then there's the just because that has nothing to do with anything they're actually doing. For a parent, it's walking past their kid, giving them a kiss on their forehead and saying, "I'm so lucky to be your parent. I'm so lucky to be your mother," or "I'm so lucky to be your father," or "Thank you, Hashem, for my so-and-so." Those things build up a child tremendously. It's not related to anything they're doing. So it's not dependent on performance. They just have value. And I think teachers can do this as well. Then if there are times that we have to do it, at least we're withdrawing from someone who they've been feeling good about themselves in their classroom, at home.
I have a Rebbe, Rabbi Gershon Kramer. He's an 8th grade Rebbe in Halb in the Five Towns. He's one of my Chashuva Rebbeim. He told me recently something, and he said I was talking to him about this topic a few weeks ago, about, trying to impact kids and make them feel good. And he told me something that he does, and I've been trying to do it since then. And I was so blown away by his ability to just have this, to be conscious of this. He said the first time you see a kid every day is the most important time. Because your hello in the morning is, to him, it is always a drop of nervousness as a Rebbe and Kabbalah Chaimer, as for sure, as a principal. And he said to me, he told this to me, he said, if I'm ever talking to a parent, I haven't seen a kid in a week, 2 weeks, I'm at a kiddush on Shabbos, and a kid is trying to catch my eye, my Talmud, and I know that I will not be able to give him the Shalom Aleichem, I will not make eye contact with him. I will never, for the first time of the day, as my Rebbe told me, make eye contact with a kid unless I have the ability to give him my entire Shalom Aleichem. And it's mind-blowing. And now I see in the morning, you'd say, I don't have the Rebbe Bender Shalom Aleichem kiss in the forehead. I'm not there yet, but that's real, right? But the ability when
it is. He's on to something. It's huge.
When you meet kids in the morning, that just because that, hey, good morning, is that deposit in the bank. I wanted to just ask one more question, and that is, tell it like it is. Pull no punches. You see plenty of kids in your practice. What percentage of them blame a Rebbe, a teacher, a principal for why they have low self-esteem? How much of this is really our fault? Don't worry,
I
we'll
don't-
edit it. If we don't like the answer, we'll edit it. So it's okay.
No,
I'm
it's
Cass-
really an important question. Usually, there's something else going on besides for that. There are times, I would say 25% of the time, obviously this is just a rough estimate, that there is a teacher or a principal, and it's usually in like middle school and up, not like in the lower grades. Not usually, at least not because they're not able to verbalize it then, that
Right.
there was a seventh grade teacher that said something that shattered them. I just had this last week. A girl who's in 10th grade, and I had seen her back when she was in 7th, and in 8th grade, she had a teacher that really made a comment that shattered her sense of self. And she stopped going to school at that
Whoa.
time. Yeah. And she became very not good at coming to school. And she, at the time, did not share it with anyone. And it was huge. She's in 10th grade now. And she shared that was the teacher and she shared the comment. But that's
I had that in camp 3 years ago. Kid comes to camp who I knew for a while, and he came to camp different than the year before. And I called his mother, and I said, kid's an out-of-town kid. And I said, Yankel's great. I love him, have him every year. Something happened in school this year. He's just different. What happened? And she said that his 7th grade Rebbe asked a very simple question in class. I mean, to me, these are just horrible stories, but these happened. And he got it wrong, and the Rebbe said he belonged in public school. You don't know the question. You don't know that Avraham Avinu Bris Milah was a 99. You belong in public school. And she said, like that, he shut down. So I would hope that that's extremely rare.
And also, those kids tend to be the more emotionally, intense, or have a lot of anxiety, or both, meaning very often it's the combination. The good news is children are more resilient than we think they are. They really are. And our relationships with them have tremendous value. That smile in the morning, the parent doing the just becauses. It sounds so basic, but these things are the ripple effect of things like saying, like Dr. Eli Leibowitz said, I believe that, and things like making those deposits, whether they're on specific positive things or just because. They sound basic. They're not basic. They are huge. And I see that all the time because I see some of the work that I do is sitting down with the parents and empowering them to be that person for their child. I feel like sometimes 50% of the work is the work I do with the parent. Even though I'm seeing the child more consistently, only having the parent in for a parent session here or there, that work is huge because then you're teaching them to be able to be that person for their child, and they are the solution in that regard.
I noticed you didn't yet address, the actual incident or the child or what they said, or is that on purpose? Would you say that's really not the issue? Like a kid comes home and says, the girl made fun of my skirt, or I don't know, whatever the issue is. They didn't give a specific one in the question. It seems like someone with a healthy self-esteem would be able to blow that off and move on. So like to dwell in that, is that not useful, or would you say?
I think it's a great springboard to get dissecting the topic. I mean, you could apply it now to that. So to that girl, for the mother to figure out why is she falling apart so easily? Why is she having a hard time? Is there that underlying social anxiety? Was there a bad experience that happened to her? That's what I would suggest that mother or father do to kind of figure that out. And then to go to those steps that we spoke about. The modeling, and hearing them out. I didn't say that, meaning letting the child get it out. Sometimes when the child's really worked up and devastated, they're like that hot air balloon, right? And we need to give them that opportunity to just deflate first, get it all out, so that then they're in a space where they can come online and hear what we have to say. We talk about that. Instead of to sound very, I guess, coming from the field of psychology, they're not just amygdala anymore, which is the feeling part of the brain, but they're coming back online cognitively that they could think more clearly again. Because when they're emotional, they're not very logical.
In your experience, and I know we don't want to talk about medicine too much, but what percentage of your patients, at the end of the day, medication, and forget ages, is a huge part of what allows them to succeed?
So anecdotally, but also I don't have the numbers on hand, it depends what the issue is. If the issue is anxiety, therapy is a fantastic, amazing option. It could be at times that medication is a good tool to use together, but it's not like it's the only option. When it comes to ADHD, it's not that there's no one, claw, like that's how it has to be. The research is somewhere around that 80% do significantly better when medicated.
Wow.
And I say that with a very heavy heart.
Even though they complain that it loses their self-esteem. I have kids complain to me, I hate the way I feel.
And that's why it's not for everyone.
So it's
that's
like
why
it's almost like it ruins the whole purpose, because now I don't feel like myself. I hate myself with this medication. It's not me. So it's almost like
so that's going to a whole nother topic. And it's not that I necessarily believe that every child with ADHD needs to be medicated, but we're asking them to do things that aren't necessarily within their ability, and the tools themselves may not be enough to do it. So then the question is, do we change things in their environment? Do we lower expectations? But if we're going to keep them at that level of expectation, then it's not fair to expect it and not look at them at least being assessed for medication.
Wow.
This is not a push for medication. There's a place for everything. I have seen some kids do amazing with their parents, really going head on, taking an approach on making it work, and the child flourishing. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort.
As we've said a few times in this podcast, if ADHD was cured, there'd be no more Rebbeim and principals in Klal Yisrael.
And what if you
And
TLC
world
podcast?
leaders. It's a diamond. ADHD is a diamond in the rough. It needs to be polished, and if they can get through their school years intact, they have more potential than the average child.
As we wrap
They
up,
really do.
would you be able to leave our listeners with a rule about when do you go for help? Meaning, a child has some anxiety, they express some social issues. When is it time to say, let's get a professional? And then we'll wrap up with that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great place to wrap it up. The general rule of thumb is when it's starting to affect their ability to function on a day-to-day basis. Now, what would that be? So that's where a parent has to be honest with themselves and say, how are they functioning academically, socially, and emotionally? Those are the 3 areas. And if it's affecting those areas to the point that they're not able to function in their day-to-day environment the way same age peers are, that's when it's time to say, you know what? This is probably a good time to just get, someone to help us in raising this child.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. I really think we covered a lot of important bases in a short amount of time. And it's great that people like you are out there in Muncie and available for our families. We thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So, Rabbi Garfield, that was informative. I feel like it's good to have professionals on.
Yeah.
So we could, we could learn a thing or two. It was a little heavy for me in the sense that, as I said, like in the school environment, when these kids who have anxiety and ADHD, and they're all trying to, whether they're medicated, not medicated, we have that achrayus, the 80-20 achrayus is something that I feel now a charge to go back to my yeshiva with and to tell my rebbeim and the teachers, and it could be something as small as, I don't know, make him go, bring something to the office, or, I have one Rebbe in the yeshiva. I hope the kids don't figure this out. One of the younger grades, that if a kid needs a break, he says, go tell Rabbi Schonfeld, I have a note for Rabbi Schonfeld. The note says the kid needs a break, and the kid comes, and feels, which is amazing. It's an amazing usage of the 80-20, but we have to keep filling in. We've used the Rick Lavoie, poker example so many times of depositing poker chips to play the game of life.
Absolutely.
But it's challenging.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to give you an thumb is think about how far ahead you are than people 20, 30 years ago who didn't even know this whole thing was even a discussion, right?
Right. Well, then no one had anxiety.
Oh, is that what it is? They didn't need deposits.
Yeah.
That's like a new thing.
Stuff.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on The Learning Curve. I would like to remind you how to get in touch with your questions and your comments.
And we know, Rabbi Garfield, from that, in case people thought no one calls into The Learning Curve, just listen to episode 2 of The Learning Curve, right?
Right. Yeah, we got a great call.
It's out there, and they'll be coming fast and furious. Yeah, continue with the voice number.
Okay, so you could call in at 443-686-9339. That's 443-686-9339. Or you could send questions to email, which is thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com. That's one word, thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com.